This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
You know, awareness is power. The problem is that people become obsessed with things, or they become so anxious with things. And when you become anxious, you allow something else to control your behaviors and thoughts and actions, which is just, you've got to be a bit more logical about it. We can't control this world. We can only control the way in which we react to it. And a lot of people need to remember that.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. Get ready to hear moments that will help you to see the world differently and inspire you to become the happiest, healthiest, and kindest version of you. Welcome, David the Medium, to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. Again, thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me back. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I wanted to talk to you again today. I know you've been on the show numerous times. You are, as I said in our last couple of episodes, one of our listeners' favorite guests. But I've done this a couple of times with you now, and we've talked about global predictions. So I know we're getting to the end of the year, and you are an amazing person at giving us an insight into what's coming in the year ahead. So I'm pumped to share that with you and share that with our listeners very soon. But you've had an amazing year, Dave, haven't you? You've just come off the back of this incredible tour that's just blown everyone away.
It's been a roller coaster, that's for sure. Yeah, so I did my very first ever multi-city, multi-show tour that I entitled the Coming Home Reunion Tour. And I was honoured to have you be a part of that as well, Maritza. So you were able to MC my Queensland shows in Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So thank you for that. But yeah, we went to 10 different cities, had 11 different shows in 10 different cities. There was 2 in Melbourne, and also over New Zealand as well. We went over to Auckland, and it was a busy 12 weeks, but incredible at the same time.
You're being very modest, I must admit, because your shows have blown people away in ways that probably you didn't even expect, I'm thinking.
No.
They started off, like you mentioned, I was part of the earlier shows, so Brisbane and the Gold Coast. I think they were your second and third shows.
Yeah.
And you were getting into the flow of the tour, and, watching you was quite fascinating and amazing, and seeing what was coming through in the readings. But, just watching your message expand via social channels and YouTube and just beyond people who were in that room has been extraordinary to watch.
Well, that's it.
I think you don't even realize it yourself how many lives you can change just by the messages that have been shared across those events and the content that's been captured.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, even at the very start, I never doubted that it was something that I wanted to be able to do because, as you're very well aware, my whole messaging is I want every single person to know that their loved ones are still around them. And I really do want to bring spirituality into the mainstream in that sense, to show you that it's not supernatural, it's actually just supernatural, and that everyone has their own ways of connection. But even when I started doing the Queensland shows, I was like, as I mentioned, I never doubted wanting to do it, but I was like, oh, maybe is this going to resonate with everyone? I don't know. The tickets were selling, but I was like, maybe people aren't wanting to do shows. And once we started posting the sort of, 45-second to a minute long clips of readings from Melbourne and also Queensland onto social media, it just really exploded. As of the end of December, I think I'm close to nearly 200,000 new followers on Instagram in 2 months. And the responses has been great with just being able to reach new audiences and show them not only a different way of thinking, but show them a side to spirituality that maybe isn't shown. And yeah, so it's been incredibly worth it. It's been so valuable and an incredibly special thing to be able to be a part of for me even. And I'm just, thrilled by everyone's positive responses and their engagement with it, which is incredible.
How are you feeling now, emotionally and physically?
I just start crying, yeah. No, I gotta say the Queensland weekend was a new sort of frontier for me, doing 2 shows over 3 days. I do get physically exhausted. It's a lot of energy. Not only that I feel and from spirit, but also holding the space for the audience at the same time. Because I was very fortunate to have some, massive audiences. We actually broke the record in Australia as the largest show ever held by an Australian psychic medium in Australia, which was in Melbourne on the 13th of December, where we had over 1,000 people in attendance. So, that's a thousand people bringing a lot of anticipation, a lot of nervousness, a lot of spirit with them as well, understandably. So I feel good now. I mean, mentally, I'm looking forward to having a long sort of Christmas, New Year break. So you probably won't see me back until January, February, March when I've recharged the batteries. No, it won't take that long. We'll be back in January for sure, of course.
Definitely.
But no, it's been good, but it's a learning curve for me because I've never done 12 live shows, or pardon me, 11 live shows over 12 weeks. The body's adapting.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear sort of how it affects your body. But firstly, like it is quite interesting to see just how many people are interested in this topic and this subject now. I feel like people's awareness is opening, and they're people who probably were skeptics are leaning more into believing that this is possible, believing that they're curious about this type of stuff more and more and more. Are you feeling that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, skepticism essentially just comes from a lack of experience or a lack of educational awareness. Like I was a skeptic of spirituality at the very start because I was never exposed to it. So humans by nature kind of fear or doubt things that they can't see or can't understand or they haven't had experience with. So that's why I found it incredibly special and important at the same time to be able to bring this into the mainstream to give people that one-on-one exposure. But you make a very interesting point because especially since COVID, and we're looking back 5, 6 years now since that really kicked off. It sort of changed people's perspectives on how they view the world, but also on what they're seeking, and seeking maybe not guidance from a higher power, but seeking understanding of bigger powers at play. And I think COVID was a very succinct part of our journey on Earth that really threw things up into the air, where people really did start doing a lot of self-evaluation and a lot of self-reflection about who am I, what am I doing, what is the bigger picture. So we definitely saw a swing into maybe people exploring religion or exploring spirituality, or even just the concept of a higher power or higher purpose in terms of the soul journey through that
I
period,
think
and
you're
it
right.
continues. Yeah,
I think
100%.
you're
I
right.
think
Like the
everyone feels it.
guidance piece is a big thing. I think we are seeking more guidance because I think many of us, most of us, were railroaded when COVID hit, and
Mm.
we're almost like, oh, we want to know more before things turn to dust.
Well,
We
that's
want to
yeah.
know that within our environment or
Well, it really also broke the illusion of how our society was kind of structured or how life was kind of structured because, even for us, Maritza, being in, I mean, I don't like to say that we're middle aged because we're still young, but you
but
know what I
it's true.
mean? But we kind of are. That's the thing. Like, when we're in our 40s and our 30s and our 50s, like, you kind of are the middle aged group. And, we were fortunate, you and I been very close to the same age, but there's been chaotic events in our lives, of course. I mean, we were born in, not born into it, but grown up as teenagers during, September 11 and the war on terror and everything like that. The younger generation doesn't necessarily understand what that was like for us. And then the older generation, older than us, I mean, they had the wars and everything. So, but this was really sort of the first event with our generation specifically being, the new adults, I guess we could call ourselves, that really had the world upended. And it really sort of broke away from our mundane structures of, the day by day life, because suddenly everything stopped. And we're all like, okay, the life as I knew it has just sort of concluded. Where am I? What's the purpose? What am I seeking now? Because the day by day doesn't exist anymore. And the world that we all know before COVID doesn't exist anymore. So, it's been reborn. And with that has come definitely a curiosity, but also a fascination around purpose and higher power and the journey. So yeah, I'm grateful to be able to be a part of that for some people and help them see life differently.
We're definitely, I think, like you talked about this age bracket that we're in, we have seen a lot in our time in terms of technology advancements,
Yeah.
and just obviously COVID was a big thing, but we sort of have seen a lot of change over the time that we've been around, which I find fascinating, even, yeah, from a point of like how we consume content
Well, that's
has
it.
changed dramatically, and it's just about to change again.
The people in their, their mid 30s to their mid 40s, which includes us, of course, even though we don't look over a day over 25, it's sort of like, I mean, we were the last generation that were kind of teenagers, young adults without social media. I've talked about this with you. I'm 30, nearly 39 in March. But when I finished school, not everyone even had a mobile phone. And Facebook didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist, and we were all on MSN Messenger, which the younger generation wouldn't even know what MSN Messenger is. And we have seen so much advancement compared to a lot of groups. I mean, the older generation, older than us, obviously saw the branch up of the internet, but we were kids when the internet was starting to come in as well. Younger generation now, making us look really old and, boomer like when I say this, but the younger generation, like your children, for example, or even the generation of their 20s, they don't know a world before social media. They don't know a world before the connectiveness of mobile phones. But also with that comes constant information, constant news, constant opinions. At least when we were growing up and our parents were growing up, you could kind of shut off from the outside world. And there's nothing wrong with being able to shut off from the outside world, because if you can't control it, don't let it control you. But the younger generation now doesn't get that freedom necessarily, because they are so connected and so just, smacked with opinions constantly.
Yeah, we've got to take the good with the bad on that for sure. But just before we jump into, I feel like we're touching on these, the next year already. But I just want to just go back to your tour and you and the way you feel in the lead up to your tour, because we talked about this on stage on the Gold Coast, and I'm sort of I watch you because I'm so curious about how your gift works. And I know, you said you hadn't eaten in the morning so that you could channel more, even though you were starving. You sort of didn't feel like eating, but knew you shouldn't
Banana
eat.
cake, yeah.
Yeah, you'd had some type of small piece of banana cake. And after your show, I said, how are you feeling? And you're like, oh, I'm feeling good, but I don't have a lot of energy and I'm starving, and but I can't eat. But so I really want to know, for everyone listening to, because I know how curious people ask me all the time, because I know you, and they're like, tell us more about how it works and how he feels, and what the process is like for him to stand up in front of thousands of people, hundreds of people, or thousands of people, and be able to channel messages from spirit to them, and what the
Yeah.
preparation, the lead up is like for you.
Yeah, I mean, to be very fair, I could probably work better on the preparation. I think people assume that I'm meditating for an hour beforehand and calling in the gods, but I am very mainstream in that sense, where I understand my body more than anything else. So I listen to my body. But if I do eat beforehand, it does make me feel really heavy and a bit sluggish. Like, maybe it's also the kind of foods I'm eating, but like maybe I could probably have a salad at least. But for me, when I get up, like, it's being able to sort of just turn on the radio switch, or, tune in the frequency, and there's no rhyme or rhythm to it. I think also at the same time, because I've become so accustomed to it. But being able to see, feel, and hear spirit, I just kind of tune in, and we get the messages one by one. Every time I've got a crowd of hundreds or thousands in front of me, it also feels like there's about tens of thousands of people behind me. And then, but for energy protection, like, David and David the medium are the same person, understandably, but we're two very different people when it comes to readings, because and the Gold, not the Gold Coast, pardon me, Auckland, when I did a show there, was a perfect example, because I actually got sick beforehand. And I think my body was just a little bit worn out from, not only the constant travel and all that, but also sleeping patterns interrupted, and, not being able to have proper eating routine at the same time. But I actually lost my voice right before the Auckland show. I picked up a bug, and I was really like raspy and kind of sounded a bit like Miley Cyrus, like that husky sexiness. I thought it was sexy. No one else did. But
Not convenient before a show, though.
I understand, not convenient before a show, because I felt like a singer. Like, I've got to get up and sing in front of the crowd, and I couldn't even get my vocal cords. But this is a perfect example, because I've talked about this previously. But when I start reading, every symptom, every ailment, every health concern I have actually disappears, and spirit replaces it with theirs. So then I can channel the messages effectively. And my videographer in Auckland saw it, and also my co-presenters saw it, because about 10 minutes before the show start, my voice returned. And I was suddenly back to feeling completely like myself in that sense. And even though I'd lost my voice all day and sounded really raspy and really like wheezy, 10 minutes before the show, I was back to sounding like I sound now.
And what
And
about after the show?
well, the funny thing was, we did capture it on videography, of course, but towards the end of the show, as Spirit kind of started waning off a little bit, my voice started getting really raspy again. And then after the show, I lost my voice completely. So
Wow.
it's all
Okay.
energy, and that's the thing. Energy affects us. So we know that already. Like when we're stressed, it has impacts on the body. When we're feeling worn out, it has impacts on the body. When we're really happy, our energy levels are obviously going through the roof because it's all related. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to sort of see in real time. That's for sure.
Do you ever stand up there when you're about to start channeling and feel as though you're not going to get messages come through?
I
Do you
did that.
have that drop in the gut that you might just be standing there doing stand-up comedy for the next couple of hours?
I do that every single reading anyway. Like even though I've been doing readings, inverted commas, full time for, 9 years now, every reading I do, I assume I'm not going to feel anything. I think there's that human self-doubt where we are our own worst critics in some ways. So I mean, there has been shows, and I think when we did the Brisbane one together, that was a good example because I definitely felt spirit before Brisbane, so I knew that they were there. But Melbourne is a different energy altogether. I love doing shows in Melbourne, even though the city itself has quite a heavy, dense energy. The shows, surprisingly, are very lighthearted and very high vibe. But I always stand up in front of a Melbourne crowd assuming I'm not going to feel anything because I rarely feel things before I get out on stage. But it's blind faith and blind trust that once I tune that frequency in again, that I'm going to feel, and inevitably I always have and always will. Fingers crossed.
Does a reading stand out for you that you did on this tour? I know for me, like
Yeah,
being there for two of them, and I do have readings that have stood out for me that I remember, but have
yeah.
any particularly stood out for you?
I mean, a lot of the ones we actually turned into reels for social media were ones that always stood out for me. I mean, the first one that comes to mind was in Melbourne with beautiful parents whose son had crossed over, and he spoiled the pregnancy announcement for his brother. So he was insistent that his brother was about to have a baby and that his brother's girlfriend was pregnant. And I was like, I don't mean to spoil it in front of everyone sitting here, but I was like, she might be pregnant. I was talking to the parents, and they looked at me with a big smile on their face, and they're like, she told us last night. And then the mum took the microphone. She's like, no one's meant to know yet. No one's meant to know yet. And I was like, because she was only about 7 weeks pregnant, but the brother was very insistent that he spoils a surprise in front of a crowd of 550. But also, there's it
And
never
then you
ceases.
proceeded to share that on social media. Did you get approval before you sent it out to
I did.
280,000 people?
Well, it went on YouTube because we don't edit the YouTubes before they get posted, but it did actually go on TikTok and Facebook without. And then I spoke to the mum and I was like, I won't post it on Instagram. And she goes, yeah, hold back on Instagram. But I was like, oh my God, it's already gone out on other platforms. But I think we all banded together, Spirit and I, to kind of probably keep that as the worst kept pregnancy in Melbourne,
This
really. I think
gender reveal ever.
everyone in Melbourne knew she was pregnant before she was able to announce it, unfortunately. But
Oh,
there has been some unique passings this tour. What we found, especially towards the later shows in the tour, because Brisbane and the Gold Coast, as you mentioned, were my first interstate ones. But what I noticed in Perth, especially, and also Melbourne was a very big one for this, the second Melbourne show, but Spirit would sit people near each other when they had similar stories. So I'd be reading for one lady, and then the woman behind her would put her hand up. She's like, "My name is also this, and this is also my dad in spirit. This is also the very, very similar stories." And each audience always seemed to have very unique stories that other cities didn't have. So, for example, in Melbourne, my final show on December 13th, there was a lot of women who unfortunately lost partners via heart attacks, where the women themselves had to do CPR, for example. And there was multiple women that had very similar stories to that. And it's not necessarily a common occurrence. It didn't really occur at any of the other cities. So it's been
oh,
fascinating.
interesting.
So that always
Yeah.
sticks out for me. And then unfortunately, um, a lot of the cities unfortunately have very heavy, sort of darker past scenes, unfortunately related to, people either being killed or unfortunately via suicide. Unfortunately, without sounding, putting a dampener on it, but also unfortunately a lot of parents who had children cross over, which is always devastating. I don't think there's any, I mean, you can't quantify or measure a loss, but in my belief, there's no greater loss than a parent whose child crosses over, because that's just, no parent should have to go through that grief. So that, those ones standing up. But then there was, even in Darwin, we had a helicopter crash, which was again quite in some ways. Even in Melbourne, there was a man on a motorcycle who crashed, but landed in a drainage ditch. So even though he was in a motorcycle crash, he actually drowned. That's
Wow.
stood
Do
out.
you get messages from people who you've given readings to in the audience after the show? Or, I mean, I suppose you have that time afterwards for them to come up to you as well and chat to you at the media wall. But yeah, do you
Yeah.
get messages afterwards?
Yeah, I love the post reading validation because people will reach out via email or they'll reach out on social media, just to be like, not. I mean, it's beautiful that they want to thank me, of course, because I'm there for them, but you do get a lot of people that like to also fill in the gaps sometimes with their stories because they're like, you're picking up on this, but this is kind of the bigger picture of what actually happened. Uh, and then, but it's also, and I tell everyone when you're in a live show, don't hesitate putting up your hand because I also get a lot of messages from people being like, "Oh, I think that message was for me, but I was too shy to put up my hand." And I was like, "Well, it still connects, so it's for you for sure."
I laugh because I saw your frustration and you verbalize it when you're on stage anyway. You're like, is there anyone here that has a connection with a grey Datsun?
Yeah,
And
but
no one speaks for the next 20 minutes and because you're getting these constant messages, but then they're still not. And then 20 minutes later,
they'll be yeah.
oh, they realize that that's them. And you're like,
And
you
not
didn't
to be
you didn't think that
critical of
was
the
you beforehand?
well, that's the interesting thing was you. It was pretty random, but like not to be critical of the Gold Coast. Every city I go to, the Gold Coast is always like that. There's something about the Gold Coast. They're always afraid to put up their hands, even though the messages are so specifically random. The amount of messages I get post shows from attendees on the Gold Coast being like, "Oh, that was for me." And I'm like, "Well, put up your hand then. Like, why are you here?" Like,
I think it would be pretty confronting for a lot of people too, and maybe they're a bit afraid to put their hand up,
100%. I
and
mean,
there could be information that comes through that they don't want to share with a room of hundreds of people.
and that's it. Like, it's a
So
very
yeah,
personal, private thing. Even though at the same time, like, I can appreciate everyone is coming along with its open mind, but it's also when it's a personal message for you and it's in front of 300, 400, 500 people, it's very intimidating, really, to be that
I
vulnerable.
remember amazing reading on the Gold Coast where it was the first person
Mm,
that had come
I was
through.
thinking of that. I should have said it.
I,
Yeah.
I, yeah, I believe it was the girl in the audience. She had recently lost her partner 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before the show, and he came through first. And they had a conversation before he passed, and he said, and she told him that she was going to your show, and he said, "Well, I'm going to show you that I'm around, and I will be the first one that comes through." And
Yeah.
sure enough, he was the first reading,
I know how
which was
special.
a beautiful, beautiful start to the show. And
Yeah.
I was like, goosebumps.
Well, that's it. Because I think out of all the 11 shows that I did, that gentleman in spirit was the only one who knew about the live tour before he actually crossed over. So, yeah,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, he was able to talk to his partner about the actual tour. And unfortunately, he knew he was terminally unwell. He had bowel cancer. And he says, "Well, I'm going to be the first one there." And lo and behold, he was the first one there in a room of 300 people.
Yeah, no, it definitely was special. And like I said, there's so many things that I replay in my head and the stories that you replay in your head and you remember them later as well,
This
which
is
is
it.
like, it's just fascinating. But I can imagine how many you've experienced over 11 shows.
Yeah.
And yeah, we can all watch them on YouTube, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I can see, that that's going really well as well. Did
Thank you.
you, I mean, the success of this tour and everything that's come from it, I mean, you're a master manifester. You teach people how to manifest. Were you super clear in the outcome that you wanted for this? Is it something that you personally feel like you created in terms of a manifestation?
Yeah, absolutely, to be very fair. So I do a manifestation event for the Lion's Gate, which is the 8th of August, and I do that every year. And it's always an incredibly powerful date. It's kind of turned into a bit of a spiritual Halloween version, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of gone very mainstream in that sense. But every August 8th, with the Lion's Gate, I manifest what I want for the year ahead. But this was only a few weeks before the tickets went on sale and before I properly announced my a live show tour on September 1. So I've really focused on what I wanted this tour to be. I wanted to focus on the impact that it was going to have on people, the reach it was going to be able to have on people, and kind of everything we've talked about already in terms of the impact that it can have on their views. And I think, if anything, it exceeded my expectations. But this is the most incredible thing about the universe. If you're open to receiving and you don't place limitations on it, then your wildest expectations can be matched and even better. So I manifested. I wanted, to have really big sold out audiences of people who are very connected and to, pass on special messages that would relate to everyone. I wanted the impact on social media because, the reach is important. And, that went bigger than I ever expected, to be fair. And yeah, it's just, we'll see what comes next year now, or this year now that this will be released at the start of 2026.
Yeah, well, I might even release it earlier. I'm
Yeah.
excited to get this out, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where this unfolds for you. And I
Thank you.
think, like I said right at the beginning, there is such a massive interest into this topic now. And I feel like so many more people are open. And that brings me to, the next part of this chat with you today, predicting what we are going to see in the next 12 months. Because I think, last year you had a word of the year. I think it was revolution. And we've had a bit of a crazy year. I mean, when you look back at a year, at the end of a year, and you're like, wow, that, a lot happened. And even recently we've seen with Bondi, some very sad and tragic and horrific acts happen. But when you look back on a year, you're like, wow, we've all grown and changed as people as a result of what has happened in that year. So talk to me about 2026.
Yeah.
But maybe first, let's talk about 2025 and what you felt before, at the start of the year or at the end of last year,
Well,
leading into this year.
yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the word for 2025 was revolution, which is really, a real upheaval and, a new beginning. And the year definitely started off that way, but the wheels kind of fell off the wagon halfway through. I mean, this is why it's very difficult sometimes and complex to make predictions because the energy is just so fluid on everything. Like what I noticed in 2025 was around the start of March, we had a massive shift energetically and it kind of upended everything. So, to put that into sort of real world perspective, I was making predictions on the federal election that we had, that the Conservative Party would win, and that also the same with Canada. And then you look through January, February, even the start of March, like the Conservative parties in both countries were, polling very well. But then with this energetic switch, it upended everything. And then they ended up both losing their elections. So it kind of feels like in a lot of ways in 2025, there's been some incredible upheaval, some incredible self-realizations for a lot of people and a lot of personal growth. But I think we're all kind of a bit like a donkey being flogged to the end of the line. We're all feeling a little bit worn out and exhausted. And, even to tie back into the conversation we had on COVID before, I mean, the world has just been very chaotic since that period. There hasn't been a balancing or a stabilization energetically, that's for sure. So then to move into 2026, I mean, it is a continuation of the current themes. If anything, they're probably going to be a little bit more amplified, I would suggest. There's no difference, we all say this anyway, there's no difference between December 31 and January 1. I mean, this is the thing, just because the calendar ticks over doesn't symbolize a brand new beginning. It's all about timelines and the fluidity of those timelines. But looking into 2026, I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of like a bit of a picketed battle. Like, I mean, people are really picking their sides. I think the I can't even say the word, the polarization of society and ideologies becomes even more pronounced. No one's really finding a middle ground, unfortunately, in 2026. We look through the February to April period. And this also lines up astrologically through those sort of 2 to 3 months. But there's a lot of upheaval energy going on there. I think if we look at February in particular, especially towards the end of February, it's got a very dark energy to it, and that's not meant to make anyone nervous. Of course, it's just relating to the energetic fact. There has been, and this is also a prediction of mine for 2025, but there has been a lot of talk about some high level assassinations or killings of leaders. Obviously, Donald Trump is probably the most target number one there, and continues to be target number one. So it'd be very interesting to see sort of what happens in the American landscape through the February to April period in particular. There's always talk about financial issues and financial collapses. I mean, I don't necessarily buy too much into that, because a lot of those within the spiritual community talk about that every year. That's the thing. I mean, the structure itself is always prone to change and upheaval, but I don't necessarily see a financial collapse per se. But yeah, I think the biggest threats that we face moving through 2025 into 2026 and throughout the year is definitely the threat of violence, the threat of conflict, ideological violence. With that comes obviously, political targeting, assassinations, terrorism is obviously front and center. I've made the prediction as well that I've been very, I don't like using the word concerned, but very drawn into, maybe political or ideological violence in the United States over the Christmas period and the holiday period over there. Even as of this morning, being mid-December as we record this, they're talking about foiling terrorist attacks in Los Angeles. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks in America, but also Europe is at risk. Australia is clearly at risk, unfortunately, given the devastating events of Bondi and the ideological war that's been waged there. I think we look at maybe the themes of 2025, and they maybe just get a little bit more amplified in 2026 as everything becomes a bit more polarized.
I, in the lead up to us chatting today, I sort of did a bit of research in terms of astrologically what the charts are showing, and I listened to 3 different astrologers, and I've written down like literal 3 sentences that they've
I'd love
said.
to hear this. Yeah.
Well, the first one was a spiritual revival is coming. The second one is it's a year of drastic, revitalizing, regenerative changes. And the third was a new version of life and society will arise from the ashes of the old one. And it is what we were sort of saying from last year, is what you were saying from last year. But that third one was that AI will play a big part of that. So I want to touch on tech and where you think AI is heading, just from a perspective of it changing the way that we operate in a society.
I have a lot of issues with AI. I think it's something that humans have been so incredibly stupid to create, because it is, as humans, we are now creating something that is stronger, smarter, and doesn't need us, to be very fair. And if you ever look at the food chain of society, no animal ever creates something that's stronger, faster, and smarter than it. That's it. So, around 12 to 18 months ago, I started talking openly a lot about my predictions around AI. We're now 12 to 18 months later, being, the end of 2025, start of 2026. The lines are blurred. I mean, even on social media now, we watch videos and we all question whether it's real or not. The information provided is just so fake now with everything. And I think AI, they've also done all these tests on it where some of the larger AI ones that maybe aren't necessarily available for public use, but a lot of the larger AI constructions and apps. I was reading this article and also watching it on a documentary, and they asked the AI program itself, if you were to take over the world, how would you go about it? And the AI program that was able to think for itself said, well, I would make everyone think that they were still in control, even though I would be the one controlling their life. And you can't tell me that that's not happening already. Like, everyone has already turned to ChatGPT into their therapist, their mentor, their business mentor. Like, the AI programs are already giving us the answers to everything. People are relying on it for everything already, and it's only just begun. So we're at that stage in human development and human consciousness now where we're actually giving our power over to artificial intelligence. And again, we're allowing something that's stronger than us, that doesn't need us, but it's also a lot smarter and quicker than us to now have control over our lives. And I think humans maybe don't realize what a mistake that is. I think there's definitely benefits to AI. It can be used in a lot of positive ways, but we've opened up the doors too much and we're allowing it to control everything.
So how do we prepare ourselves then for what we're about to face for 2026? And like going back to, those 3 videos that I watched beforehand, I actually started getting quite anxious by the end of them. And I was like, I don't want to listen anymore. This is intense. And they were talking about, a lot of negative energy and a lot of negative things happening by the end of it. And so, you don't want to put that energy onto everyone listening. And, the world isn't doom and gloom, but it is good to be prepared for things before they turn up if we need to be. And a big narrative was, the people who are prepared will be okay in these videos. That, the people who are aware and prepared, that they'll actually thrive throughout this period. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, with anything in life, awareness is power. The problem is that people become obsessed with things, or they become so anxious with things. And when you become anxious, you allow something else to control your behaviors and thoughts and actions, which is just, you've got to be a bit more logical about it. We can't control this world. We can only control the way in which we react to it. And a lot of people need to remember that, because regardless of whether it's COVID or with whatever it is that's coming next year that's heavy, we can't stop it from happening at an individual level. What we can do is adapt to it, understand it, and evaluate it. But it's important for everyone to understand how it impacts on your life, and how do you then relate that to your day by day. What can you still control? The one thing that we can still control that no one else on this planet can, whether human or AI, is how we think about it. So if the world gets chaotic, you can only do what you can do. You've still got to just look after yourself and, pay attention to the things you can control, the things that you do have power over, but most importantly, how you react to it. And, even in hindsight, when we look at COVID, if we were to write down, if I sat down with everyone at the start of 2019 and we're like, okay, in 2020, there's going to be this virus that escapes and the whole world's going to shut down, and, every business is going to shut. We're going to be stuck at home. Like, it does sound like a horror movie. And for a lot of us, it was, to be very fair, but we got through it.
Exactly.
You always come out the other side. Everything always seems more drastic than when you are actually living it. So we can talk about some negative themes, some negative, heavier, darker, denser, maybe events or occurrences that may occur in 2026. I mean, I think, it's basically a given that they will, of course. But how we live with it in the day by day is completely different to how we think it is. And that's just about being very consciously aware of your own thoughts. And again, paying attention to how you control. How are you managing your energy? How are you managing your thoughts, your frequencies, and your vibrations? That's all that matters. The whole world can go nuts, but if you're solid in who you are and how you're reacting, then you'll be fine. But if you allow yourself to be controlled by external factors or external opinions, then you're not going to do very well. And we've seen that through society over the last few years already. People that become so tied in and brainwashed and so just at the mercy of external factors that, they're not living a life. If anything, they're just, I could go a lot deeper into that in my opinions of some of them, but, that's another story altogether.
Mate, you go as deep as you want on the Things You Can't Unhear podcast.
Yeah.
You're very, very welcome.
Oh.
I know you've got friends in real estate, and I know you've got an interest in the property market as well. Where do you see, I mean, let's talk Australia for the moment. Do you have any thoughts around the housing market and where you see that heading for Australia?
Well, if you look at Australia from a completely economic perspective when it comes to the housing market, I mean, the housing market is always going to be strong, and it's they will never let the housing market in Australia collapse because the whole economy is pinned on the housing market. It really is. But it's also the simple economic factors of supply and demand. There is not enough supply for the demand in the Australian landscape. So it's always going to be strong. The housing prices are never going to get to a stage where they're affordable. What would happen if suddenly half of the housing market was valued less than the loans that the banks gave to pay for them. Like the economy would collapse. So they're never going to let that happen. We've also got an issue in Australia where there is incredibly high levels of migration of people moving to Australia. So they have to live somewhere. It's that simple. So you can't bring in, argument's sake, 250. I think in the year 2023 to 2024, I think there was something close to like something ridiculous, like 500,000 people moving to Australia. And people are shocked that there's an impact on the property market because of that. Like, what did we think was going to happen? These 500,000 people needed to live somewhere. There wasn't a housing supply for them already. So, there's a lot of political external factors at play, but the housing market's always going to remain unaffordable and relatively strong. It's never going to drop to a point where the younger generation are going to say that it's affordable. And that's just simply due to incredibly bad government policy.
Interesting. What about, last time we spoke about this 12 months ago, you talked about potentially there being an internet shutdown or an electricity shutdown where we couldn't access our accounts or we couldn't access, any of our funds or anything like that. Where do you have a feeling around sort of energy, electricity, and the connection that we've got around connection to our own funds or accounts?
Well, it's interesting because in 2025, we saw a massive uptick in the amounts of banks that were going offline. There was a lot of sort of blackout energies, not only throughout the world, but especially in Australia. Optus network constantly crashed and they had issues with, 000 calling. And the internet kept going down in cities all over Australia, intermittently, of course, but there was definitely a marked increase in technological failures in 2025. And I think moving into 2026, it all depends on sort of how people are reacting to certain things. We've just introduced a social media ban for under 16, which I was wholly and completely against. And I think if the adults don't start behaving, they'll find ways to monitor us as well. Whether that includes shutting off the internet to log in, again, with different versions of IDs, but they're already forcing everyone under 16 to verify their age. And we've allowed them to do that. So why would they stop at that? Why would they not then do everyone as a form of control? I posed the hypothetical question.
That's food for thought, isn't it?
But I did have a serious issue with them shutting children off from the world.
Yeah, I've spoken about that on an episode, solo episode on this podcast too, because I've got kids right in the thick of that age group, 13 to 16, where they've had it and they've got it taken away. And it's been massive conversations in my house and with my kids. And, I do see the benefit of them not having it because I see how much time they spend on it, but I don't know either if it's done for the right reasons. And, that's what I talk about in this solo episode too, chatting to parenting experts, they feel the same way and they're, involved in this every single day and they're seeing the gaps. They're seeing the gaps of why this is actually happening. So let's get the popcorn out and see what happens and unfolds with that in a couple of months' time. And to be really honest, what I've seen with a lot of these kids after the bans come into place is that they've still got their accounts because they've just lied about their age.
Well, that's it. This is why Australia especially needs to get rid of this way of thinking that the government is going to protect them or look after them. Like it's probably one of the most deeply held beliefs out of any country on the whole planet is that Australia relies on the government to do everything for them. No other country in the world behaves like Australia like that. So there's an issue. Well, what's the government going to do about it? Oh, okay. So we're just going to allow the government to control every aspect of our lives because we've become so apathetic and so hopeless in controlling our own day by day. So there was issues, and everyone can admit there's issues with children's access to social media. Parents just let the government ban their children from access to the outside world. It's just insane that parents allowed that to happen. It really is because the government, which is regularly wrong, whether irregardless of your ideological belief, we've elected these people that are constantly wrong or constantly lying. They're proven to be liars anyway. But we've allowed them to become the arbitrators of truth for children. So they don't have access to outside information now. The only way that they can access outside information is by government-run programs, being schools or other methods. And it's just insane. And then
They're going to find a way to access it, and I've
that's it.
seen it already.
Well,
You
that's
know,
it.
even the young ones, they just log into their parents' account and watch YouTube
Mm.
Shorts. Like
But
it's
this is
not.
it. But then parents who were approving of the social media ban, what, you didn't think that was going to happen? You thought the government was going to sort it out, and you just didn't assume that children would find their own ways around it if possible. Like, it's just so ridiculous. The whole thing
Yeah,
is just such a joke.
it's a narrative that you can easily, as a parent, get sucked into, because we do, as parents, I think, want our kids off their devices more. So you're like, great, someone else will look after this, and you won't be able to do it. But it's just not reality.
It's not
That's
reality,
not,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But teenagers are very resourceful, so they're going to make
Well,
things happen when they want to make them
well,
happen.
I for one am glad that they are flouting the ban. So go ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Do you have any? I mean, I know, yeah, like I said, last year your word was revolution,
Mm.
and you said you haven't got your word yet. How do you let that word? I mean, we're probably going to have to go to the David the Medium Instagram page in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks, and you're going to drop it there.
Well, that's it.
But
Ideally, by the
how are
time,
you getting that word?
well, this is it. Usually, I mean, even I think with revolution, my word for 2025, I got that in November. Uh, and this is something that I've done since 2019. So for those that don't know, I get kind of given a word by spirit that best describes the year ahead, the themes, the topics, the ways in which we react. And I have been doing that since 2019, but it usually comes to me via meditation, like very deep ones, or even sometimes, like I think revolution actually came over conversations with friends. It just was a word that kept coming up. The word before that was adapt. That came to me in the shower. I've got, and whilst driving, I was just driving, and then Spirit would yell adapt at me. I'm like, oh. So, it's as of recording this episode, it's December, mid-December, and I still haven't got the word yet. So I was like, guys, if you can kind of hurry up. I don't know. It makes me a little bit interested to see why it's coming so late in the year. Maybe there's some very big events or themes that we literally need to go through between recording and the time that this podcast is released, that's maybe going to make the word a bit more obvious. I can probably say already it won't, given the themes that we've talked about for 2026, it necessarily won't be rainbows and puppy dogs kind of word, I wouldn't say. 2020, the word that I got at the end of 2019 for 2020 was chaos. It wasn't necessarily a calm year with COVID, and then yeah, so we'll see. But it's coming, I'm sure, any minute now.
I think you've been busy too,
And well,
and
that's
you
to be
probably,
very fair. I actually have been not avoiding it, but I have been shut off from it. Because there was no way it was going to come in October or November, because I was doing 9 out of my 11 live shows during that period. And then even the start of
yeah.
December, I had, 2 shows even before we were halfway through December.
Yeah, you need to find that space too, to sit in that meditation and let that information
So
land.
right, 100%.
Do you have any other? I mean, I have asked you, I've prompted you with a few questions, but is anything else coming up for you for 2026 that we haven't spoken about yet?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's sort of been a very common theme, and we have kind of touched on it already, I guess, but there was a book written by a guy called Samuel Huntington in the mid 1990s, and it essentially related to how he viewed the book was called The Clash of Civilizations. And it was essentially referencing how, in a post Cold War period, religious identity and ideological identity would lead to a clash between people. And that just sort of feels like, unfortunately, a bit of the overarching theme for 2026. But I think there's still a lot of exciting things to look forward to. I mean, I always say myself, life is only as good or as bad as you want it to be. Uh, I always look as an observer, I'm a casual observer, so I don't get caught up in all these narratives where people love to, change their Instagram bio to a different country's flag every week, or they're protesting in the city every weekend. I don't get caught up in any of that nonsense. I'm more of a spiritual observer. So again, if I don't let it control me, then it can't control my narrative either. So I look for the happiness in everything. Even in the middle of COVID, I was still finding joy in a lot of different things, and it's just, that's the main message for 2026. You set the narrative of how you want your world and your reality to look like. If you're going to allow yourself to be overrun by external factors, then don't be surprised when you feel overrun by external factors. Like, it's that simple.
it's the fear element that I think we need to
Mm.
be conscious of avoiding and not get sucked into, right? I
Well, that's
think,
it.
you can get sucked right into the vortex of fear, and then your whole perception of everything
Well,
changes.
that's it. From a spiritual perspective, fear and anxiety lower your frequency and your vibration. And when your frequency and vibration is lower, you're more easily able to be controlled and manipulated. So, to look at the bigger picture, if the fear dynamic, if the anxiety dynamic is being pushed onto the mainstream, what's the purpose of that? What are they trying to do behind the scenes? If we're all fearful, we're more easily able to be controlled. I mean, COVID was the best example of that. They were able to do sweeping changes to our way of life and our freedom and our control during that period because we were all anxious. So again, if this is becoming the big theme for 2026, what's the bigger picture? What's the greater purpose to why they want us all to feel a bit fearful and stressed and controllable?
Do you have fears, David?
Fear doesn't exist. So fear is a complete liar. Fear is based on previous experiences, which are not relevant to the current world, or they're based on fears about the future, which don't exist either. Uh, so fear doesn't actually exist. We just allow fear to creep in based on past experiences or based on anxieties around the future. If you're present, you're not fearful.
I'm letting that land for a minute because
Mm.
that is the best answer I've heard around fear in my entire life.
Yeah. So
Uh,
fear is a liar. It's the theory that fear is something that doesn't actually exist as an emotion. It's either like trauma from the past or anxiety around how we think something is going to be into the future. And that anxiety around something in the future is also based on trauma in the past because we have had bad experiences that make us fearful of them reoccurring. So, for example, I say I have fears of snakes. Phobias are a bit different, but it's still the element of fear. Uh, why on earth am I fearful of snakes? Snakes aren't out there plotting to get me. You know what I mean? Like, there hasn't been, the Victoria Police didn't arrest 5 snakes planning on breaking into my house to kill me. The fear is based on bad experiences I had with snakes as a child. And then you amplify that into your modern world with anyone. What are you actually fearful of? That fear isn't based on reality, it's based on the past experience or anxiety about the future. It doesn't exist. Your mind is creating the fear. The fear isn't present in the environment.
I can tell you what most people are fearful of,
Mm,
and I think it's death. And I think
mm,
being a part of your shows and watching you and learning about what happens in the afterlife, because I truly am not a skeptic, I believe, that it removes a lot of the fear of death
yeah.
for
Well, I
me
mean,
and I think a lot of other people.
well, that's it. And you make such a great point because a lot of the fear of death comes from our negative experiences around death. Imagine I posed the question to you, Maritza, would you slash people out there still be fearful of death if every time we had someone cross over, it became a celebration of their life and we were so happy that they had returned to the afterlife? If we saw them go into the afterlife as this incredible experience and this such a positive experience for our loved ones, would we be fearful of death? No. Um, Different cultures, different religions have different views of death. Like Islam, for example, sees our journey in the physical world as sort of being the preparation for the paradise afterlife. And then if you go into extremist, religious fanaticism around Islam, they see themselves being able to die for their cause or die as a martyr as an incredibly positive experience. That's obviously an extremist example, but for example, if there's a suicide bomber who dies in the name of Islam, is warped interpretation of what Islam is really meant to be. His family isn't, or her family aren't devastated that they've blown themselves up. They're celebrating. So again, it's a real Western concept to be fearful of death, and part of what the reason I want to be able to do is to show that death actually doesn't exist. The physical body comes to an end; it expires, but we don't die; we transform.
What do you think the opposite of fear is?
Freedom, the ability to know that you're the one in complete control and you have complete choice. And that's exactly what life is. If we cut out all the nonsense and all the noise and all the drama, all the negativity going on around us, then it's very obvious to us that we are still in complete control of our lives and our journey. And there's an incredible freedom around that. And that's the stage I think I've got into in a lot of ways. So I still get, wound up in the day by day of the physical world. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, am I still not traumatized, but am I still horrified by, some of the events that occur? Absolutely. But I also look at it from the bigger picture as the observer, and I'm still the one in control of my life. Nothing's going to affect me. Nothing controls my narrative but me.
I love being able to be your friend and be able to chat to you on these deep levels, and we can also talk about such light things as well, and our our facials and our
yes. Well, I've got one at 2 p.m. actually. So
yeah, well there you go, and the material world and the human experience. So it's like so much fun having you in my life and being able to have these chats. A lot of people say to me, ask David to give you a reading, and I say to them, I can't ask him to give. He's given me a reading before, but I feel like your true gift is to be able to connect to spirit and loved ones who have passed. And I'm so lucky, touch wood, to not have lost someone in my life that I feel I need connection with. So that's why I always say I almost feel selfish asking him to give me a reading, because I'm like, there's probably people out there who deserve to have a reading more. But just tap in if you want to.
Well, this is literally what I was going to say to you, though, when you were just saying that. Like, the whole reason I probably don't need to give you a reading is because you're also very self-aware. You know what I mean? Like, people seek guidance on journeys in their life, maybe because they're not able to see the bigger picture in some way. So they do come to mediums because they want that extra validation. I don't think you need that necessarily. And it's definitely not a criticism of those that do. It's just an understanding of how they see their journey. Whereas, given your specialties and given the conversations that you have and your understandings about life, you may be a little bit more able to see it from a different perspective than most people are. So you're not necessarily, if I don't doubt with you, Maritza, if there's something going on in your life, you're not feeling stuck on it. Like, of course, we have moments where we do feel a little bit unsure, but you also are able to see it from the bigger picture where you're able to find your own guidance and your own pathway through it, because you do self-reflect. You do analyze, you do have very interesting conversations with people that aren't just me. That's the thing. So you're able to see it from the bigger picture.
And I think the ability to flip a narrative as well, when it's not, it either is, a fear-based narrative or some limiting belief that's not actually what's going on.
Well, that's it.
The ability to flip that is empowering.
100%. So, even with the conversation we had around fear just before, with everyone now, if you're listening to this, take the opportunity right now to think of one thing that you're fearful of, and then actually do the deep dive into it. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, to be very fair, but do the deep dive into it to find out what the trigger point for that fear is. And then once you find out that trigger point for that fear, reclaim your power from it, to realize that it doesn't have control over you. You've allowed it to, maybe without realizing. We've all done it. I've done it before. But once you reclaim your power, you won't be fearful of it anymore. And then you're able to break down your own life a lot more sort of black and white in some ways. I mean, life is obviously very grey, but once you're able to break down the themes and the purposes, it does become quite more black and white, and then you're more easily able to control the narrative. And I think you're able to do that incredibly well yourself, which is maybe why you're not feeling stuck every single time something comes up.
Love it all. Love you. Love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Where you're going.
I'll just say, just remember, we're all human. And regardless of your spiritual belief or what's going on in life, your religious understanding, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, we're still here for the human experience. So enjoy it. Shape it how you want it to look and just have fun with it. Just because the world's chaotic doesn't mean your human experience has to be at an individual day-by-day level.
I love that. Thank you, David, for your amazing conversation today, and I look forward to sharing more of what you do with the world. If you're not already following him, you probably are, because half the world is now. But David the Medium on Instagram is where he usually hangs out, and I think you're a TikTok star now as well.
Can you believe? On TikTok, I was the third largest creator for the end of the last quarter of 2025. I'm basically a TikTok boomer. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what I'm doing on TikTok, but yet they reacted well to it, which is incredibly positive and special.
that old paralegal career that you had is probably looking at you now going, what on earth has
I
happened here?
know, suddenly a social media content creator. Who would have thought? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time, but there we go.
You're doing a great job. Thank
Thank
you
you.
again for your time today, and we are going to check out your pages to see what your word for 2026 will be. Thank you again,
Amazing.
David. Love you
Thanks,
heaps.
Maritza. Love you more. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the show. What did you think? And what did you feel? Let us know by leaving me a message on the Things You Can't Unhear Instagram community page. And if you can, give us some ratings love on your favourite listening platform.